What a morning. We're going to be fine. I'm curious if any of you made a New Year's resolution this year. Anybody? I see a few hands. Making a resolution is going out of fashion in some circles, but I know that many of us still take time at the turning of the year to reflect on the year past and think about how we hope this next new year will be. Earlier this month, related to this, one of my colleagues shared an animated video in a Facebook group that I belong to. It began with an image that looked like tree branches, imagine trees branching out, or a river delta. So there was a single wide line at the base that split into two, that split into two, that split into two, and you get the picture. The gist of the video was that making New Year's resolutions the way we often do is also often not successful. Often we make resolutions that are just too ambitious. I will exercise every day for 1 hour, or every week I will write a thank you note to someone who has been important to me, or I will read 52 books this year. And then when life happens, when we get sick or busy or just lose interest, we abandon it and sort of feel like we failed, and that change that we had hoped for doesn't happen. This video suggests that instead of making resolutions that are from one place to the next, we choose a word or a theme for our year, or even for a season. Things like, this is my year of wellness, or this is my winter of reading. Instead of that outsized resolution that takes you from couch potato to Olympic athlete, you might imagine the process instead as those branching paths that I described. Over to one side of the tips of all those branches is the word or the theme that you've chosen. And as you live, you make choices and your path splits. So if this is your winter of reading, perhaps when you have some downtime, instead of picking up your phone to scroll, you pick up your book and read a little bit. If it's your year of wellness, maybe sometimes you choose the fruit instead of the fries, or maybe sometimes you don't, because that's how life is. But if on the whole you make more choices that move you toward your theme or your word than choices that point you in the other direction, you will be able to celebrate a success. As I watched that video, the idea about small daily choices that add up reminded me of a book from one of our most creative thinkers of our time, named Adrienne Maree Brown. Has anyone read her work? A few people. I see a few hands, yeah. Her book, titled Emergent Strategy: Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, was published in 2017, and I think of it as a handbook for social movements that want to change the world. In the introduction, she traces the roots of her thinking about emergence to various sources, to nature and science, to people in her own family. Activist and author Grace Lee Boggs, who wrote, "Transform yourself to transform the world." Margaret Wheatley was another source of inspiration. Margaret has written several books about the role of brave conversations in making change. And she wrote this: "Whatever the issue, community is the answer." Octavia Butler is another source. Octavia Butler was an Afrofuturist who wrote in her book, The Parable of the Sower, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." In addition to these individuals, she says she has also been inspired by movements such as the Occupy movement. Remember that? The Black Panthers, the Zapatistas. Brown not only writes about these principles of emergent strategy, but even her actual book is an embodiment of it. She encourages readers to take parts of what she's written and expand on it as new thinking emerges. And she acknowledges that though this was her thinking at the time she was writing, her ideas about this and everything are likely to change. So with that introduction, here are the principles of emergent strategy. Small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. Change is constant. Be like water. There is always enough time for the right work. There is a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. Never a failure, always a lesson. Trust the people. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy. Move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build the resilience by building the relationships. Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows. I am especially drawn to that first principle when I think about our focus here today on possibility. That small is good, small is all, that the large is a reflection of the small. I've preached about this idea before, and many wise people have said it in many different ways. I believe it's still an important message. How we are in our small choices, our own personal choices, has an impact. It has an impact on how we as a community will be. Our community's choices affect our area, which affects our state, which affects our nation, which affects humanity. It starts small. Small is good, small is all. The large reflects the small. I think that Adrienne Maree Brown's emergent strategy provides some powerful tools to make change in our society. It is countercultural in many ways because her strategy says the collective, not the individual, is the focus. It is not extractive, but creative. It includes, as Brown writes, ways for humans to practice being in right relationship to our home and to each other, to practice complexity, and to grow a compelling future together through relatively simple interactions. Emergent strategy, she writes, is how we intentionally change in ways that grow our capacity to embody the just and liberated worlds we long for. Just like those branching paths that can eventually lead you to a new way of being, these small actions that add up to big change is the way for us as humans to build the world that we long for. We have done a little bit of this work as a congregation in articulating what exactly our vision for the world is. Our congregation's vision, or you could call it our hope, or our ultimate goal, what we hope to help make a reality is this: a world and a congregation that embody justice, equity, and love. Martin Luther King worded it differently, but expressed essentially the same idea when he invoked the beloved community as a possible future. Margaret Wheatley, whom Adrienne Maree Brown cites, is an activist and author of the book called Turning to One Another: Simple Conversations to Restore Hope to the Future. A transcript of a workshop that she led included this excerpt. Quote, "We completely underestimate the power of human conversation to change the world." And she goes on to cite some notable examples, such as Poland's powerful labor movement called Solidarity that began with only 9 people, and it grew to 9 million in 3 weeks before email. Mothers Against Drunk Driving that grew from an individual mother's grief to a national movement. She cites Margaret Mead's famous quote and says, people repeat it often because it is so true. Never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. One of the things we need to learn, Wheatley says, is that very great change starts from small conversations held among people who care. But talking about what really matters, the issues that concern you, she goes on to say, requires courage. Forget about the politics or the person who is driving you crazy, Dr. Wheatley advised. What are the things that you really have deep, abiding concern for? What is it that you really have some passion for? If you go into that question yourself, you will find the energy to go forward. Conversations should not be based on complaint, Dr. Wheatley adds, but based on passion and a sense of hope. Part of what I do with you on Sundays, I feel, is a conversation. And last Sunday, you had an opportunity to to be more active in the conversation by presenting me with questions. And there were some questions that appeared in that question box last week that wanted to get at our deep passions and concerns as a group. Some of the questions were worded like, what can the church do about X? And I was tempted to respond, I don't know, what can the church do about X? What do you think the church will do? What will you do? Because ours is a shared ministry. If you grew up in the Protestant church, you might remember the song that goes, I am the church, you are the church, we are the church together. You know that one? Yeah. As the minister, I do have specific responsibilities, but I don't do anything alone. It's important for us to talk to each other to find out what are the things this congregation has passion and concern and energy for. You have 4 opportunities coming up to do this kind of thing. This Thursday, the 16th, you're invited to attend a meeting to talk together about ideas to address our budget deficit. Having a budget deficit is not new in the congregation, but the effort to really balance the budget has been increased lately, where we really want to focus on a healthy way of budgeting, which is to have a balanced budget. I know that this stirs up anxiety in a lot of people. Talking about money is uncomfortable. I invite you to come, breathe deeply, remember our covenant, and participate, and bring your imagination to those conversations. And then next month, on February 2nd, our Committee on Shared Ministry invites you to stay after the service for lunch and a conversation about our mission. The time will be designed for you to hear from each other in small groups about how you think we, the congregation, are doing in living our mission, and to gather information for what the congregation has passion and concern and energy for. There will also be an online version of that on February 5th. All of the information about these January meetings was in the most recent parish news, and the February meetings will be in the next parish news. I'm just going to make a little side note here. Last week, somebody put in the question box, how can we support you, Reverend Rebecca? And I wish I had said, read the parish news. Okay, side note over. Information from all of these gatherings is going to come to me and to your team leaders and your committee chairs and your board, and will help guide our work, and it'll also come back to you in, guess where? The parish news, so you can read what everybody said about it. Because those leaders can't do the work alone. Just as I am not the church alone, they are not the church alone, it's all of us together. We're all needed to help live our mission and our vision in small and large ways. So recall that image of the branching paths. For our congregation, our vision, a congregation and a world that embody justice, equity, and love, is on one side of the branching path. Every choice we make together pushes us a little bit more toward or away from that vision. Our forebear in the 19th century, abolitionist and Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, wrote this: I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one, and my eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I can see, I am sure it bends toward justice. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King used this idea often in his speaking and writing, talking about the moral arc of the universe. A mentor of mine, Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons, preached about the arc of the universe bending toward justice but not because because of any divine intervention, which might be what Theodore Parker was talking about, but because of the actions of people who care. She said, our job is to yank the universe in a slightly less terrible direction. We do this one conversation, one choice, one branch in the right direction at a time. As the poet Aurora Levin Morales reminded us in today's reading that Joanne did so beautifully, another world is possible. It is our job to imagine it and bring it into being. Amen, and may it be so.